Welcome, Dr. C here again. And as I promised after that last show, we're going to talk about truly end of life now. We dealt with the early and the mid, now the later portion of your life. You still need to have a number of things in place. I always start with the legal aspect. Why? Because these are things that are irrefutable. You need to have them in place. All of the documents, the two witnesses and the notary, you need to have in place. I spoke last time at the end about medical power of attorney. Well, now, as we approach the end, not at the end yet, we're not at the end, you're still alive, you're still kicking, you still have enough synapses up here so that you can choose. Okay. What are the things that you need to do? When I gave a talk like this at one of the churches, I spoke to them right at the beginning. I said, "What do you remember as a child? Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take." Well, people say, "Whoa, what the heck? What's he talking about here?" So, what I was talking about there are the things that you need to know as you approach the end of life. You remember Mother Teresa? Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She started the Sisters of Charity in Calcutta, India. Her major premise, always go in to see someone with a smile. With a smile. Her major premise was to comfort everyone she came into contact with. And she came into contact with the poorest of the poor people of Calcutta, India. She's the one that started this thing called 5 wishes. What do I need to do at the end of life? You need to have a proper power of attorney. Now, her 5 wishes, she had a lawyer, incidentally. She did have a lawyer who accompanied her in her time in Calcutta. After she passed away, he brought back those 5 wishes here to the United States. If you wanted to get a copy of the 5 wishes now, you've got to pay for them, which is exactly, that's capitalism. You make a buck wherever you can and on whoever you can. But at any rate, the 5 wishes are, first of all, that first medical power of attorney. Choose the proper person. The other thing, the second one, second wish, how do I want people to look upon? What's my legacy, basically? How do I want to be remembered? How do I want to treat people at the end of life? And how do I want them to treat me? That's a big issue. Not totally emphasized now in some of the end-of-life discussions that people have. So, we'll talk about the rest of the wishes as we go along. Medical power of attorney. Get that power of attorney written. Sit down with the person. Tell them exactly the way you would want your end of life to go. Tell them your fears. Tell them your hopes. But tell them, or her, tell them what they are. Now, they don't necessarily have to follow your wishes, but you want to choose somebody who most likely will. What else do you need besides medical power of attorney? Like I said, we talk about the legal stuff first, because that legal stuff is very important. You also need to have an advance directive. Some states will call this a living will. We can't call it a living will here in Massachusetts. But we can give people our advance directives, what we want to do at the end of life. And we can put it in writing. I know when I first wrote out my advance directives, I kept thinking of different scenarios, and if this happens, this is what I want. If this happens, this is what I want. I had a whole sheet, double-sided, all of the possible scenarios. I said, this is ridiculous. All I really need to do is to talk to the person who has my medical power of attorney, tell them some of these things, and then hopefully they understand where I'm coming from and what I want. So, basically, besides that, the advance directives, like I said. How do I want to be treated? And how will I treat people? Just like Mother Teresa. At this point, I want to mention something about the MOLST form. M-O-L-S-T, MOLST form. Medical orders for, my God, I'm losing it, totally losing it, life-sustaining treatment. Medical orders, life-sustaining treatment. It comes in a pink form. Stands out from all the other white forms. What does it say? It tells you what type of medical interventions you would like to have done on you. This came out in 2010. Prior to that, all of the results that came in from the hospitals and from outside the hospitals on CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, were dismal. 2 to 3% of people were making it through. And so you can say, well, I can see under those circumstances, I don't want to have CPR. Don't bang on me if I'm at that point in life and my heart gives out. The latest statistics, 2019, in hospitals now, almost 20% of people now make it through that CPR. 20%, not a big number, but 20% make it through. Of those 20%, almost all of them leave the hospital. And half of them who leave the hospital have no brain damage. Now, I know it's not a big number, but it made me think. When this first came out, I was quick to get one. I put that right on the top of my papers. Now I have second thoughts. I don't want this all signed, because what this means is that if the EMTs come to your home, you've got cardiac arrest, they will not do anything because you got that form signed. Who signs this form? You and your physician. Now, it could be you and your nurse practitioner. Could be you and your physician assistant. But you signed it ahead of time. Nowadays, your healthcare proxy, your medical power of attorney person, can sign it as well. That's the important thing. It should not be on the top of your pile at home anymore, unless you truly have a stage 4 cancer or you truly are in undying, unrelenting pain, you want out. Then you can sign that, or your medical power of attorney can sign it, put it on the top. EMTs will not bring you back. So, you should have the blank form at home, but for God's sake, don't fill it out yet. You need to think about, this is truly end of life, that you need to have this signed. Now, what else do you need? Well, you need to also consider your financial affairs. Like I said, if you already had your durable power of attorney, you've got your person, but they may need some assistance. They don't know all of the elder law. So you may need to have an elder attorney and your accountant help out with that as well. So that's probably the only real help you really need at the end of life from outside. What are the other things you need? Well, you already signed over all your internet stuff. Those digital assets, remember, they're important. Don't forget them. You also need to consider medical. How do you want to be treated at the end of life? You may have to, and I talked about this before, we went up to at least up to assisted living, where you needed some help with one of the activities or more of the activities of daily living. What if you no longer can do any of those activities of daily living? Should you sign up for something like, say, hospice care? Everybody knows hospice care. Not everybody knows that there's another entity called palliative care. Both hospitals, St. Vincent and UMass, have palliative care units. There are palliative care specialists now at those hospitals. You should seriously consider palliative care. Why? Well, first of all, what's the difference between palliative care and hospice care? Well, to qualify for hospice care, you have to have two physicians say that you know you're not going to live for 6 months or longer medically. Maybe you can't get someone to say that. Okay, so maybe you don't necessarily qualify for hospice care. But for the sake of argument, let's say you do. Palliative care, there's no time limit. You could be around for several years. What they both do is they bring in all of the things that you normally have helping you with your quality of life during the course of your lifetime. In other words, they'll bring in spiritual guidance. They'll bring in the financial people you need. They'll bring in maybe some activities that you enjoy doing. Let's say that you still can write, or you still can draw, or you still have your vision and you enjoy watching different things. They'll bring that in for you. Hospice care doesn't, even though on paper they say they do that. And if you have hospice care and you're staying at home, you have a much better chance of having that happen. Now, why do I say that? Why do I make that distinction? I learned about all this stuff on the job, you might say. I went through this with my mother. I went through this with a younger sister. I didn't know squat about palliative or hospice care before that time. I apologize, I did. Because my wife's two parents both had hospice care, and they stayed at our house at the end. They had good care. My sister, my mother were both in a nursing home. Once that hospice care was signed, the staff, the very staff of that nursing home, ignored them. Now, that's not supposed to happen. But let's face it, in reality, the staff knows you have less than 6 months to live. Why am I going to bust my butt for this person who's only going to be around for a couple months? Well, that's the attitude that they portrayed. I would not sign up for hospice at the nursing home anymore until they change their ways. And I know that a lot of the nursing homes they'll deny it. But they need to re-examine what they're doing. So, what's the difference between palliative care and hospice care? Like I said, the time limit. They do bring in all of the different modalities. Hospice care is preparing for your death. Palliative care is hopefully preparing for you to get better, to get off of palliative care. So they're going to bring in more of the medical stuff. They're not just going to give you the morphine that the hospice care gives you. They're going to take care of your pain and try to get you better. Palliative care is still in the process. It's still new. It's still in the process of getting a lot of these things approved. What a nuisance that is. Your damn insurance companies. You have to go in and get advanced approval of all these things. But that's a topic unto its own. But nevertheless, palliative care is the way to go until you actually reach the time when you need to sign that MOLTS form. Okay, so palliative care is a very good thing. What else do you need to consider? Well, you've also got the social issues, and this is again where palliative care will help. Maybe you belong to a particular society. You enjoy going to that and participating in that. They'll arrange for transportation, get you there. So they try to get you to keep a lot of the qualities that you consider as part of your life. That's the benefits of palliative care. Okay, so let's go on. We talked about all of the legal issues. We talked about all of the things about transportation. What about that personal care? What about the ones who are going to actually bathe you, dress you, etc.? Well, again, if you can get a good home health aide, one that you can trust, maybe they'll be there just during the day, maybe they'll be there full time, one or the other. You get a good one, keep them. Keep them. It's certainly much better there than at a nursing home. And I don't want to down all nursing homes, but they're not cheap. Cost you probably $80,000, $90,000 a year. And you don't get the care that you would from the personal care of a home health aide. Okay. What else do we need to do? Well, you also need to consider, the funeral. And I know a lot of the people look upon death as, well, let's talk to the funeral director. Well, fine, and you should, and you should. And you can pre-plan your funeral. I know, we have a plot already in the local cemetery, my wife and I. And again, we try to plan ahead. So we have several plots all together. Are we ever going to need them? I don't know, but it was one less headache to just get them all at once. When at least I could afford it then. I'm glad we got it then, but you need to think about that. You don't need to think about a headstone and stuff like that right now. Just get the plot. You maybe want to pick out the nurse or the funeral home that you want to go to. I know you have several choices, and they're willing to talk to you about it. They'll go through a whole pre-planning thing for you and with you. Very good thing. You're always going to learn something. So, no commitment. Learn about it. See what you need to do with respect to the actual funeral arrangements and all with you. Some people even like to write their own obituaries. I actually started to do my own one day, and I got a couple of pages, and I said, this is ridiculous. Some people who know me, they know this already. They don't need to know all this information. So just give me something simple. But you may want to put down a lot of your accomplishments during the course of your life. It always brings me back to there's an organization that's called Good Life, Good Death, Good Grief. And when I first saw that, I said, good grief, what is it, a Charlie Brown thing, you know? No, it isn't. You've had a good life. You want to have a good death. But you know, there's also this grieving component as well. And you want to try to minimize it as much as you can. You can't eliminate it. You're not going to grieve yourself. You're buried now. So you're trying to minimize it for your family and friends. So you do the best you can. So, good life, good death, good grief. So you go over that with the funeral director and you plan your whole thing. There's some people who plan their music, plan their wake, plan their obit. They love to get into the planning stage of everything, which is fine. If that makes you less anxious about passing away, do it. Do it. You don't have to, but that lessens the burden on your family who has to go through all this suddenly, and it is always sudden, almost always, minimizes what they have to do. I give a talk called What to Do When a Loved One Dies. And there I'm talking mainly to the spouse or to the families of the loved one who died. What do they need to do? A lot of this can be minimized by pre-planning. And if this is all in place, it just follows logically what you have to do. And I had something like 81 or 82 different things that the person has to do as a result of the loved one dying. Well, anything that you can do to minimize that is important. What are the other things now that we need to consider at the end of life? Well, first of all, I should talk for a moment about the caretakers too, because I know as we're running shorter on time, I really feel for the caretakers. They give of themselves all the time. You can't put a price tag on what they're doing. So I want to let the caretakers out there know that there are things out there to help you. You can go online. Get all the organizations that have programs for caretakers that try to help you. They can maybe just give you some ideas on what you can do to make things smoother, both for the person you're caretaking for and for you. Maybe to give you just some respite care. Something to help. Caretakers, don't neglect yourself. This is so common. Neglecting yourself, caring for your loved one. What happens then is you hasten the time that you're going to be in that same position. You're going to hasten it. You don't want to do that. You can still accomplish all you need to do for that person and take advantage of all the things that are out there in the community to help you. Who's the first place to call? You can call Elder Services. There's a couple of different very good elder services in town here. One is done through Fallon, one is done through UMass, but Elder Services of Worcester. Contact them. They'll be happy to give you all the information that you need and to help with a plan to help get you through that whole caretaking time that you're spending. Okay. So, I want to spend a moment going over a couple of things. Number one, a death cafe. Oh my God, here's this guy talking about a death cafe. What's a death cafe anyway? Well, what that death cafe basically did was to get people to talk about these end-of-life issues. Not just the legal issues, but all the other things associated with end of life. Maybe one day it'll talk about caretaking. Another day it'll talk about the legal issues. Another day it'll talk about the social issues. In other words, you never know what the topic's going to be at the Death Cafe. There's no set agenda. People sit at different tables, and there is a single person who's the monitor, running the thing, basically. I had an opportunity to do that so far just once, and interestingly enough, it's mostly in churches that they do this. Very interesting. Remember way back when, before the U.S. and all, the priests were also the healers. Yes, they were priests and healers. Then this Western culture came in. They split them off, priest and physician. And as the science and medicine expanded and expanded and expanded, it became worse and worse. The split became greater. And now people tend to not go to their spiritual place of worship anymore. They tend to avoid it till the end. Till the end. The physicians, on the other hand, they're not practicing the art of medicine anymore. They are so imbued with the science of medicine, they forget that the patient they're talking to is a person. That person doesn't live in a sterile environment. They don't live in the hospital. They have things that they interact with every day. And they have different needs. Doctors don't want to talk about. They don't have the time to talk about that anymore. In fact, you're even lucky to see the doctor anymore. And so, unfortunately, that schism that I talked about has expanded exponentially because of the rapid scientific breakthroughs that we're seeing in medicine. Of course, this gets me off the topic a little bit, but this is the sort of thing we talk about at the Death Cafe. We split up into little groups. Each little group, usually about 3 or 4 little groups, will talk about a specific topic, and it's the choice of the table. Then at the end, all the groups come together and we talk about all the major things that were discussed at the little groups ahead of time. The whole thing lasts about an hour and a half. So, if you belong to a church, you might consider something like that. I don't know why it has to be a church, but I'm very comfortable going to any church, synagogue, whatever, and talk about those things as well. So, we've gone through a lot of stuff in these last 2 sessions, and I hope that you picked up a few little pointers about the end of life. I do have all of the blank forms for all the legal things, and I'd be very happy to sit down with you and talk about how you can fill those out and properly have all your documents in place. So it's been very nice talking to you about this issue, which is very near and dear to my heart. And I want you to join those exercise classes, 10 o'clock every morning. We'll see you then. This is Dr. C. Bye-bye.